My name is Caroline Mercer, and I work as an internal auditor for the U.S. Treasury Department. Precision is my language. Numbers don't lie. And people eventually do. Tonight, the Thanksgiving table in my mother's Connecticut home was set for 12. But the real gathering was happening in the study behind the glass doors. The smell of roasted turkey couldn't mask the tension. Something was about to break. And I had brought the document that would do it. Victoria stood at the head of the antique desk. Posture crisp. Voice sharp as if she were cross-examining us. She held up a folder and said the will was clear, as the eldest. She inherited everything our grandmother's estate. The house. The investment accounts. All of it. My mother nodded, wiping the corner of her eye like a woman performing grief. Aunt Carolyn shifted in her chair, murmuring that perhaps we should wait for the lawyer. But Victoria cut her off, insisting she was one. The air thinned with her certainty. I watched her speak, the gold on her wrist glinting under the chandelier, and thought how she'd practiced that tone her whole life, the tone that left no space for contradiction. She looked at me finally and smiled the way people smile at an old mistake. "Aren't you going to argue?" she asked. "Cry about fairness? This is the law." Caroline. I met her gaze and said quietly, "Actually, I brought something to share first." The moment her laughter faltered, I knew she sensed it, the shift of control she didn't yet understand. I reached into my bag and placed a navy blue folder on the desk. It landed between us like a verdict waiting to be read. Victoria's expression flickered. My mother's hand froze on her glass. And for a heartbeat, no one spoke. "What is this?" she asked. But I didn't answer. The evidence spoke louder than I ever could. It was the only sound that mattered, the soft, deliberate weight of 5 years of silence being broken by one file. Victoria straightened the pages in front of her and said, "Let's make this official. According to the will, the entire estate worth about $3.4 million passes to me as the eldest daughter." Her tone carried the same edge she used in court, sharp enough to silence everyone at once. My mother dabbed her eyes, whispering that Grandma Greta had always believed in tradition, while Aunt Carolyn shifted and asked if perhaps we should wait for the estate lawyer. Victoria smiled without looking up and said, "I am the lawyer. I've reviewed every clause. It's very clear. Oh, here." I watched her finger trace the signature at the bottom of the page like it was divine proof. "There's a provision for you, Caroline," she added lightly. "Around $50,000, which is generous considering your income." Her husband, Derek, chuckled into his glass. And no one corrected him. My mother murmured that it was fair, that I should be grateful, that managing an estate this large was too complicated for me anyway. Her voice shook, not from doubt, but from rehearsed loyalty. I leaned back and asked, "And what happens if the assets you're talking about no longer belong to Grandma?" Victoria blinked, the words catching like static. "What are you implying?" she said, her tone sharper now. I met her eyes and replied, "I'm implying that everything you just listed hasn't been part of her estate since 2019. It's public record." The sound of Derek's fork hitting his plate was the only thing that followed. Victoria tried to laugh. A brittle, nervous sound. "You're mistaken. I've read the documents myself." I nodded. "Then you should have noticed the absence of those assets in her last filings. The estate value you quoted doesn't exist." My observation wasn't a theory, it came straight from the IRS database I'd reviewed before driving here. For the first time that evening, Victoria hesitated before speaking, her confidence cracking around the edges. The air shifted, and I could see her mind racing to find an argument that the law couldn't back. The voice that broke the silence wasn't mine. "I apologize for being late," a man said from the doorway, his tone calm but commanding. "Robert Langford, estate attorney for Mrs. Greta Hensley." Every head turned as he stepped inside with a leather folder in his hand. And Victoria's color drained faster than the wine in her glass. "I already have the official will," she said too quickly, holding up her own stack of papers as if proof could change reality. Robert adjusted his glasses and replied, "That document is outdated. The last valid transfers occurred on March 12th. Under irrevocable trusts filed with the Chittenden County Clerk." His words landed like a gavel. Victoria tried to smile, but her voice cracked when she said, "That's impossible. Grandma had her stroke right after that date." Robert didn't flinch, which is exactly why we finalized the transfers before it happened. Mrs. Hensley understood her health risks and wanted everything secured while she was unquestionably competent. My mother's voice wavered as she asked, "Competent? At 80? Robert opened the folder and pulled out signed physician evaluations. 2 independent medical assessments confirm full cognitive capacity at the time of execution, he said. Victoria reached for the documents, her hands trembling slightly. "This doesn't prove anything," she muttered, scanning the signatures she didn't expect to see. "It proves everything," I answered quietly, because those evaluations were witnessed and notarized the same day the trusts were filed. The evidence wasn't abstract. It had signatures, timestamps, and county seals, all things my sister should have understood better than anyone. Victoria turned toward me, desperate to find a loophole. "You orchestrated this. You manipulated her." I said nothing until Robert spoke first, his voice steady. "Mrs. Hensley initiated this plan herself. Ms. Mercer was informed only after the transfers were complete. The documentation is exhaustive," my mother whispered. "Why would she do that?" Robert looked at me, and I nodded. He said, "Because she believed one granddaughter would preserve what she built, and the other would spend it." The room went still, and for the first time all night, Victoria had no clause, no statute, no argument to stand behind, only the sound of paper turning against her. Robert placed another folder on the desk and said, "Mrs. Hensley also asked me to deliver this letter in the event of any dispute. She wrote it by hand, signed it, and had it witnessed." His voice was steady, but the sentence sliced through the air like a quiet verdict. Victoria tried to interrupt, but he continued reading. "To my family," he began, "by the time you read this, I will be gone. But I hope my reasons still reach you. I vote." I listened to every word as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. "Victoria," Robert read, "you are brilliant, confident, and determined. But I have watched you treat money as proof of success instead of a tool for stability. Caroline, you are deliberate, patient, and unwilling to perform for approval. Both of you are my granddaughters. Both loved, but only one understands that security lasts longer than applause." My mother exhaled sharply and whispered that it didn't sound like Greta at all. But the handwriting alone ended that argument. Robert kept reading, his tone unflinching. "Over the years, I lent Victoria more than $160,000. Not once did she repay it. I do not hold that against her. But I cannot leave my life's work in hands that view money as endless. I have chosen Caroline as the beneficiary of the trusts because she knows restraint. And restraint preserves legacy." Victoria stood frozen, mouth parted as if words had abandoned her. Derek muttered that this had to be manipulated. But even he looked at the ink like it carried more authority than law. When the letter ended, the silence pressed harder than any accusation. My mother asked why Grandma hadn't told anyone. I said softly, "Because she knew exactly what would happen if she did." Victoria's eyes met mine, full of disbelief, as if the truth itself was an act of betrayal. I added, "This isn't about who she loved more. It's about who she trusted not to destroy what she built. Robert nodded once, confirming it with the same precision he used for every signature that night. And in that small study, between the will that had lost its power and the letter that still held it, even Victoria understood that Grandma's decision had already survived her arguments. I opened the Navy folder I had brought and said, "There's one more set of records Grandma asked me to keep." Victoria rolled her eyes until she saw what was inside copies of checks, emails, and bank transfers. "Every loan she gave you," I said. "Every promise to repay. Every one that was broken. The total stands at $160,000. Robert confirmed the figures, his voice steady, and the silence that followed was heavy enough to bend the air. Victoria's laugh came out thin. "You're exaggerating. Those were family gifts." I shook my head. "The memos say otherwise. Loan repay in 6 months. Loan repay after bonus. I didn't write those. You did." Derek leaned forward, reading the notes himself, his voice low when he said, "You told me those debts were cleared years ago." She snapped. "I didn't think it mattered after she died." He answered, "It matters when you built your life pretending it never happened." "Dane," my mother whispered. "Caroline, this is cruel. You're humiliating your sister." I said, "I'm showing the truth Grandma saw before any of us did." Victoria glared at me and said, "You've been waiting to ruin me." I met her anger with calm and replied, "No, I've been waiting for accountability. Grandma's money wasn't a prop for your ambition." Robert added, "These transactions are part of the estate history. They document a pattern." His words didn't accuse, they confirmed. Victoria tried again, voice trembling now. "You make me sound irresponsible." I said, "You borrowed more than you earned some years. You made over $200,000 annually and still needed her to cover your down payments. This isn't judgment, it's math." She slammed her hand against the desk, shouting, "You think you're better than me?" I said quietly. "No. I think Grandma knew which of us would learn from numbers instead of ignoring them." The moment hung sharp, and Derek turned away, the sound of his disappointment louder than her outburst. I could feel the shift happen then, not victory, not pride. Just clarity settling like dust after a storm. Victoria stared at the papers that no longer defended her but defined her. She said, "You've destroyed this family." I answered, "No. You mistook it for a ladder." Even Robert paused at that line. Because it wasn't anger speaking, it was evidence turned human. Proof that greed always leaves fingerprints. And tonight, every one of hers was visible. The week after that night, I received a certified letter notice of intent to contest estate distribution. I called Robert immediately, and he sighed as if he had already read it in his mind. "She's claiming undue influence and diminished capacity," he said. "It's a standard play when someone has no case but too much pride." I asked how long it would take, and he replied, 6 months, maybe a year. But I'll handle it. You don't respond directly. His calmness was the same kind of armor Grandma had always trusted him to wear. My mother stopped answering my calls. When I texted, she replied once, "You've broken this family." I wrote back, "I protected what Grandma built." But the message showed delivered and never read. Aunt Carolyn came by my apartment one weekend and said, "Maybe you could give Victoria something to help her save face." I told her, "Grandma already gave her 160,000 chances to learn." My tone wasn't cruel. It was the simple arithmetic of consequence. By March, the depositions began. Victoria's attorney asked for the medical evaluations, and Robert provided both signed, stamped, witnessed. Each line stated Grandma was fully competent, aware, and acting of her own will. Then they demanded correspondence proving I hadn't influenced her. Robert sent the logs, 5 years of calls, visits, and notarized meeting notes showing Grandma initiated every step. When I read the words, decision-making appears entirely voluntary, I felt no triumph, only the exhaustion that follows truth finally standing up on its own. In April, they tried one last angle, emotional isolation. Robert's written response was a single paragraph. My client maintained consistent contact. Your client called her grandmother an average of once per month and requested financial assistance 9 times. Facts, stripped sympathy clean. By May, Victoria's attorney withdrew, citing expense and futility. Robert called that afternoon and said, "It's over. The trusts stand." I thanked him, but inside I only felt stillness, the kind that comes after months of noise finally collapse into proof. Justice, I learned, isn't dramatic, it's procedural. Signed, sealed, and quietly irreversible. The first message from Victoria arrived 18 months after the hearing ended. It was short and unpolished. The way honesty usually is. "I've been in therapy," she wrote. "I understand now why Grandma trusted you. I would have spent it all. You were right." I read it twice before answering. It was never about who deserved more. I wrote back. It was about who could protect it. "I'm glad you see that now." Her reply came an hour later. "Maybe someday we can talk. Not about the estate, but about her." I closed my laptop and let the quiet return. The estate was still under my management. The trust still growing. The house still standing in Vermont. I hadn't touched a cent for myself. That was the proof I wanted her to find. Not the money, but the restraint. Grandma's letter stayed framed on my desk. The ink slightly faded, but her logic untouched. Sometimes I read the last line aloud. "Real wealth is what survives your absence." I never corrected it. Because that was the point. She was gone. And yet every choice she made still held. Justice didn't end with inheritance, it continued in how I carried it. I've learned that truth doesn't always need to shout it, just needs to outlast the noise. If you believe silence can be its own kind of justice, stay here with me. Subscribe for more stories where revenge isn't loud. It's precise. Because sometimes, the quietest victories echo the longest.